too much away from them tonight. You know, they got to the paint, they made threes, they offensive rebound, got to the free throw line. It just was an overall bad game.
With a rebound. Bam's got 16 boards. Jimmy Butler. Levine on him. Butler spins. Nothing there. Butler. Space. Count it. With a foul.
Are you serious? This is Jimmy Butler getting a clutch bucket just to fend off the injured Chicago Bulls in order to make the playoffs. Never did we expect to see this team make the finals this year. And if you did, you're crazy. You're simply crazy. YouTube, what is going on? My name is Jake, and if you guys ever wondered what NBA team has had the hardest run to the NBA Finals, I sure have. From watching this year's Miami Heat team in the playoffs, I truly wondered, how does this team do it? I mean, on paper, this team is just a group of undrafted players with 2 stars who've never won an MVP, and led by a coach who was carried by LeBron and D. Wade back in 2013. This year's Miami Heat team was ranked 13th in the league in margin of victory, carried a negative point differential, and was barely even 500 in terms of win-loss. For many experts, analysts, and fans, this was a subpar season, and the Heat had no business of even making the playoffs.
That's another subject for another day. Let me say this. I have no concerns for the top 3 seeds whatsoever. 0. I'm not worried. Listen, I'm sorry. I just don't. Listen, I don't feel good about Miami this year.
How did this team do it? In reality, this team was subpar in the regular season and on paper, but if you look at the fine details of this team, you'll actually see a team filled with underdogs who have been doubted all their lives, players who thrive in pressure moments, and that have a head coach who's tactically and verbally smart. Not to mention, they're led by an underrated superstar who doesn't give a damn what y'all think.
Anybody else is how it's been all year long, and that's not going to change. So that's what I think it is. I think it's the I don't give a damn factor.
Everyone on this team, including Coach Erik Spoelstra, has faced so much adversity, yet they always keep their heads straight in every moment they're faced with it. With all that said, was Miami's run truly the toughest to the finals? Well, let's find out. Let's take a look at this graph, which shows all the losing NBA Finals teams since 1950, with their SRS score on the x-axis and their seeding on the y. And for those of you wondering what SRS is, it simply stands for Simple Rating System, and it works by calculating the team's margin of victory adjusted for the strength of schedule. In other words, it's a good way to evaluate how dominant that team was during that regular season. With that out of the way, you can see we have many memorable finals teams listed here. 2016 Warriors, 2017 Cavs, 2010 Boston Celtics, and tipping the chart, the 2020 Miami Heat. Oh wait, there's a couple teams missing here. Yeah, the 2023 Miami Heat and the 1999 New York Knicks. These 2 teams should have never made it this far, but which truly had the tougher path? Let's break it down. Let's start with the 1999 New York Knicks. During the 1999 NBA season, a lockout occurred. This was simply because the National Basketball Players Association opposed the owners' plans and wanted raises for players who earned the league's minimum salary. After the 2 sides failed to reach an agreement, the owners began the lockout. With the lockout season, the NBA season was shortened from 82 games just to 50. A third of the NBA's regular season was completely cut off, meaning that some teams still had more to prove, and the win-loss of a team didn't show the true story. The Knicks roster was in the midst of changing of the guard. John Starks was now in Golden State, and Charles Oakley had moved to Toronto by 1999. This team was led by an aging Patrick Ewing who was playing in his 13th season. Surrounding Ewing were Latrell Sprewell, a talented player with countless off-court problems, Allen Houston, a sharpshooting guard, and Larry Johnson, the high-flying 2-time All-Star who was nearing the end of his career. This team wasn't exactly oozing with talent, but they were the best in the league at playing hard-nosed basketball. The Knicks weren't a pretty ball club, but when they buckled down, their defense won them games. In the first round of the 1999 NBA playoffs, the Knicks matched up with the 1-seeded Miami Heat, and in terms of SRS, this would have been the New York Knicks' second toughest opponent that they would play in these playoffs, with an SRS of 5.11, which was ranked 4th in the league at the time. The Heat and the Knicks were similar ball clubs that played all out on the floor. When I mean all out on the floor, I mean all out.
Oakley and Mourning have at each other.
See this right here? This is Jeff Van Gundy, head coach of the Knicks, literally holding on to Alonzo Mourning's leg for dear life. This scene right here basically sums up the entire series for you. Game 5 was predictable, a physical slugfest just like we expect. However, the Knicks found themselves down 1 point with 4.5 seconds left. The score 77-76. After a botched inbounds play, Allen Houston received the ball and did this.
Allen Houston ducks under, got it! With 8 tenths left.
The Knicks shocked the Heat and advanced to the second round.
And the New York Knicks have become the second team in NBA history to knock off a number one. An 8 over a number one, only the second time in NBA history. Let's go to Jim Gray.
The 4-seeded Hawks were next in the crosshairs with an SRS of 2.82, which ranked 8th in the league. The Hawks didn't put up nearly as much of a fight as the Heat did. The Knicks swept the Hawks behind a dominant series from Latrell Sprewell, who averaged 22 points per game. Dikembe Mutombo and Atlanta were rudely awakened to the fact that the Knicks were now locked in and ready to make a serious run. The Eastern Conference Finals now set for a rival matchup between the 2-seeded Indiana Pacers with an SRS of 3.86, which ranks 6th in the league. The Knicks came out of the gates firing. They took Game 1 in a hotly contested physical battle, winning 93-90.
By Ewing, and the Knicks have done it. The New York Knicks have stolen the home court advantage by winning Game 1.
Then disaster struck in Game 2. The Knicks lost the game, but suffered even a bigger loss when Ewing went down with an Achilles injury. He would be ruled out for the rest of the series. Larry Johnson had other plans. He would complete a 4-point play, taking the Knicks from down 3 to up 1 in the Game 3 of the series. In the next 2 games, both teams would trade wins, but in Game 6, the pivotal series-clinching game, Allen Houston was simply unstoppable and completely outdueled the starring Reggie Miller with 32 points, completing this amazing run to the NBA Finals. With the Knicks now reaching the NBA Finals, they are now faced with the best team in the NBA. The San Antonio Spurs, who had an SRS of 7.12, which obviously ranked first in the league. Yeah, the Spurs team was serious. Without Ewing and a hobbled Larry Johnson, who injured his knee in Game 6 of the conference finals, the Spurs manhandled the Knicks in the 1999 NBA Finals in 5 games, putting an end to one of the best playoff runs in NBA history. In totality, the Knicks finished their sensational finals run with a total SRS of teams defeation of 11.79, beating the Hawks, the Heat, the Pacers, but losing to the monster 7.12 Spurs. They beat a 1 seed, a 4 seed, a 2 seed, and losing to a 1 seed. Not a bad run, I must say. Now let's take a look at the 2023 Miami Heat. As we know, this team faced off with the 1-seeded Milwaukee Bucks, who carried an SRS of 3.61, which ranks 4th in the NBA that season. This series was very unpredictable. To start, in Game 1, the Miami Heat from the jump looked more poised and played Giannis into a tough position. Giannis later in the game suffered a lower back injury, which resulted in him missing the last 3 quarters of Game 1, the entirety of Game 2, and Game 3. This was a major setback for the Bucks. With that though, the Bucks took Game 2 without Giannis, but got absolutely smashed by the Heat in Game 3, signaling a red flag to make Giannis' return. Game 4 was back and forth with the Bucks controlling all the way. But then this happened.
Butler driving right into it. It's loose. The lead, Jimmy Butler. Sets up on 3. Good. Long shot. Good.
Jimmy Butler just broke the back of the Bucks, taking a 3-1 series edge and finishing the Bucks off in Game 5 with a heart-crushing play.
Jimmy Butler. I'm
I'm stunned.
It is so quiet you can hear a #1 seed drop.
Yes, you can.
The next round would be another tough series, but definitely not as tough as the Milwaukee Bucks. The Miami Heat was matched up with the Knicks, who carried an SRS of 2.99, which was 7th in the NBA that season. Both teams split Game 1 and Game 2. Game 3 was nothing new with what this Heat team could do, as they demolished the Knicks 105-86 in Jimmy Butler's return. The Knicks and the Heat would split the next 2 games of the series, setting up for a critical Game 6 back in Miami. The greedy Knicks would do all that they can, even with Jalen Brunson's 40-point performance, it just wasn't enough. The Heat once again would be a Final Four team despite their tough regular season.
Season's over. Julius Randle. 3 for 14. It's time to trade Julius Randle.
As of now, the whole world was put on notice by the Heat, a team that everyone wrote off this postseason, lost their first playing game, barely winning the second playing game, beating the dominant Milwaukee Bucks, and defeating a very solid New York Knicks team. The Heat was looking scary. The Heat were now faced with a familiar foe that they lost to last year in the conference finals. And that was the 2-seeded Boston Celtics, who carried the league best SRS rating of 6.38. The Celtics were a dangerous two-way team. The Celtics were ranked 2nd in the league in offensive rating and 3rd in the league in defensive rating. This team was filled with dynamic players, depth, and young stars, that being Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. In Game 1, it was close all the way through, Celtics and Heat trading points. But late in the second, the Celtics turned up the heat, taking a 13-point lead. The Heat, like they've always done this postseason, stayed oh so controlled in the down moments and rally off a 46-25 third quarter, holding off the Celtics for the rest of the game and stealing a shocking Game 1 in Boston.
Celtics 4, 123-116 with a masterpiece from Jimmy Butler.
Game 2 was the exact same contest, the Celtics having a respectable lead all the way until this happened.
The bump, the grind, the gyration, and the 2 in the foul.
And they're having words. Look at this.
Nose to nose, eye to eye. Defensive Grant Williams, shot clock at 4. Here he accelerates and finds 2. Butler drives on Grant Williams, and a 15-footer will tie it at 100.
But it works.
Inside for the lead. He got it. And
The Heat would rally off a 24-9 run late in the fourth, stripping the Celtics' confidence completely.
Miami has won and gone up 2 games to none. Who would have believed this? The 8th seed on the road.
In Game 3, that confidence showed as the Heat would put the series to a chokehold on the Celtics, going up 3-0 on arguably the best team in the NBA, blowing them out of the water.
I just didn't have them ready to play. I should have, whatever it was, whether it was the starting lineup, whether it was an adjustment, I have to get them in a better place, ready to play, and that's on me.
The Celtics were done. They're getting swept, no question. Until late in Game 4, the Celtics rebirthed as Jason Tatum and Grant Williams gave them life and burned out the Heat with a 116-99 win.
Score Miami 66-43 in the second half and come up with a win and keep this series extending.
The Celtics would ride that momentum and even build on it, completely tarnishing the Heat right from the jump of Game 5. The Celtics played elite defense, completely disrupting the Heat's flow, and Brown and Tatum would drench the Heat in transition, giving them no life and taking Game 5. Game 6 was tense. The Celtics were playing ahead the whole game with Tatum and Robert Williams punking the Heat. Until late in the game, the Heat turned back on the switch, with Gabe Vincent and Jimmy Butler making clutch play after clutch play. But nothing was as crucial as Jimmy Butler's game-leading 3 clutch free throws, giving the Heat a 1-point lead with 3 seconds left.
Timeout Celtics.
But then the impossible happened.
It's off the Smart for the 7th game. Could have been tipped in, but the buzzer buzzer sounded. The light was on. It'll be reviewed.
Protect the offensive rebounding.
Oh, he got rid of it.
That's a Celtic win, and we're going to Game 7.
The Celtics are going to win. There's a Game 7 back in Boston.
The stage was set for Game 7. The Celtics had all the momentum, but when the Heat were once again faced with history, they did not blink, and Caleb Martin unraveled the Celtics in a dominating Game 7 win to cap off this sensational run to the NBA Finals.
Heat are going to the NBA Finals.
The Heat were now face off in the finals with the most dominant team all playoff long. That team being the Denver Nuggets. This team was carrying the two-time MVP, the best net rating in the playoffs, had a regular season SRS of 3.04, and just dominated the two star-loaded teams, being the Phoenix Suns in the conference semis and the polarizing Los Angeles Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. Analytically, this was one of the most lopsided NBA Finals matchups ever. But unlike the Celtics, the Nuggets smashed the Heat right from the jump. Nikola Jokic manhandled the Heat in 5 games, capping off this insane playoff run for the Miami Heat.
Win it all.
Since we now have covered these two amazing playoff runs, let's break it down and compare it. First, let's see which team had the total greater SRS in terms of team defeation by looking at the teams they beat on their way to the finals. Running up the charts in terms of total SRS defeation, the Heat looked to be the clear winner here, edging the Knicks by 1.19 points. And in terms of SRS of their respective finals opponents, the Knicks take this one, as the Spurs played a much more dominant regular season than the 2023 Denver Nuggets. But judging their finals competition just based on pure regular season point differential isn't enough. Instead, I dived into machine learning using hundreds of different statistics to assess the true strength of each of these championship teams. The algorithm clearly believed that having a high value in these 6 statistics translated greatly towards playoff wins. And having a high number of predicted playoff wins shows how good that team can be in the postseason. With that said, the 6 stats being all NBA selections, preseason odds, over 600 win-loss, all defensive selections, playoff games played, and effective field goal percentage. An effective field goal percentage is simply how efficient was that team on offense. As you can see, out of the 6 stats, the Spurs are greater in 5 of them, clearly showing that the Spurs were a more formidable team than the 2023 Denver Nuggets. And the results showed, as the Spurs had 8.15 projected playoff wins, while the Nuggets had played 7.36. Overall, the Heat had a higher total SRS of teams defeated during the playoffs than the Knicks. Secondly, the Knicks had a more favorable circumstance since they only played 50 games that season, not showing the true potential of the team, this giving the Heat another point. However, the Knicks actually had a higher playoff net rating than the Heat, meaning that they beat teams with more conviction than the Heat did, this giving the Knicks their first point. Knicks also had a tougher finals opponent from what we just covered, not to mention Ewing and Johnson were banged up in the finals. Lastly, throughout their regular season, the Knicks had a higher SRS than the Heat, making them more of a consistent team than the Heat, this giving the Heat the tie-breaking point. With all this said, I truly believe we just witnessed history this season. The Heat definitely made the toughest run to the NBA Finals ever. Not only do the numbers speak for themselves, but they also had several key players hurt along the way. The Heat also beat the 2 best teams on the road to the Finals. About every fan believed that the champion was coming out of the East, and the Heat shocked us all. But this is just my opinion. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all next time.